Hi, I'm Andy, and this is my lesson on using ArrayList methods in Java. In this lesson, I'll show you how to use some common methods to interact with an ArrayList. I'll also show you an exception often encountered when working with ArrayLists. Let's get started. In the previous lesson, we made a simple student class. Let's start this lesson by creating an ArrayList called enrolled students to hold references to student objects. Let's try to run this before doing anything else. This error is reminding us that we need to import the ArrayList class if we want to use it in our program. Let's do that. Next, let's make 3 student objects. Now we want to add these objects to the ArrayList. Remember, if enrolled students were an array, we do that by using square brackets. For example, this line of code would put S1 into the array at index 0. When working with ArrayLists, you cannot use the bracket notation at all. Instead, we access the elements in an array list by using methods. The ArrayList class contains numerous methods, many of which are very useful. In this lesson, we'll focus on a small subset of those methods, the ones that do the most basic tasks. We will write all our algorithms in these lessons using just a small subset of methods. When writing your own programs, you should definitely look through the ArrayList API to see if there's some other methods that can help you out. The first method we'll cover is the add method. This method adds an element to the end of the array list. It returns true after doing so. We won't do anything with that return value in this program. Notice this method lists E as the data type for our formal parameter. The E itself is not a data type. Instead, it represents the data type that was passed in angled brackets back when the array list was created. So in our case, E stands for student. That means we can only pass student objects when we use the add method. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll print out our array list, add the 3 students to it, and then print it out again. Notice that the 3rd student added shows up at the end of the array list. That's because this add method always adds the new element to the end. The add method is overloaded. If you want to add an element somewhere else in the array list, you should use this version. For example, let's make a 4th student and add it to the array list at index 1. Notice that the add method did not remove any elements. It simply pushed them over in order to make room for the new element. To retrieve an element from an array list, you have 2 options. You can use this get method to get the object without removing it, or this remove method to get the object and remove it. Both methods are passed the student's index and return a reference to that student. Let's see what happens when we get the student at index 2 and remove the student at index 1. As you can see, the get method did not remove the student from the array list, but the remove method did. Also, notice that after the student was removed, the students to the right of it were shifted over to cover up that hole that would have been left in the array list. The set method is a bit trickier. This method basically does a replace function. It will replace the object at index with a new student object. After doing so, it returns a reference to the removed student object. Let's see it in action. First, we'll make a new student. Then we'll set the reference at index 2 to this new student and assign the removed student to a new reference variable. Then we'll print the removed student and the contents of the array list. As you can see, the set method returned the element that was at index 2. It also replaced that student with the new student without changing any of the other array list elements. The last method we'll look at is also the simplest one. It's called size, and it returns the number of elements stored in the array list. It's very similar to the length property for arrays and the length method for string objects. Let's call the size method on our array list and print its return value, just so we can see how it works. Now let's look at a common error people make when using the size method. Suppose we wanted to print out the last element within the array list. I want the code to work no matter how big the array list is, so we'll use the size method to figure out the last index. Here's the wrong way to do it. Hopefully you see the problem here. Just like with strings and arrays, array list indexes start at 0. Therefore, the last index is 1 less than its size. Let's see what happens when we try to run the program. So we got an index out of bounds exception. That's because we tried to access the element at this index, but the last index in the array list is 1 less than this value. To fix, we simply need to add -1 right here. Let's see if that works. Good, that fixed it. So just remember that if you get an index out of bounds exception, it means you tried to access an element at an index that does not exist in the array list. And that wraps up this lesson on using array list methods in Java. I'm Andy. Thanks for watching and coding with me today.